The moment stretched, not in time but in awareness. He felt the shift before he understood it, a quiet collapse of distance that had nothing to do with space. Thought no longer arrived in sequence. Intent surfaced fully formed, complete with execution already accounted for. Kawaki's aggression sharpened Boruto's own restraint. Boruto's caution gave shape to Kawaki's force. Neither overrode the other. They simply aligned. He moved before the thought fully settled, and both bodies answered the same impulse as if hesitation had been removed from the process entirely. Kawaki advanced first, his palms snapping forward as black receivers formed and launched in rapid succession, each one driven with intent rather than brute force. They tore through the air and forced Code to shift continuously, the four-armed figure twisting just ahead of impact as the Rinasharingan embedded in his chest pulsed with unstable light. Code skidded backward, claws digging into the fractured ground to slow himself, but the space he bought was never enough. Before he could recover his balance, a disruption cube materialized overhead, its mass distorting the air around it as it descended. Code vanished a fraction of a second before impact, the cube smashing into the battlefield and collapsing stone and earth into a violent shockwave that rippled outward. He was already moving again. Boruto's body surged forward as Code reappeared, sword drawn and wrapped in a dense spiral of chakra. Wind release fed into the Rasengan coiled around the blade, tightening its rotation until the pressure carved visible lines through the air. The strike carried no excess motion, no wasted force. It was aimed not to overwhelm, but to remove whatever stood in its path. Code barely managed to block. The blade passed close enough to shear through one of his arms, sending it spinning away in a spray of pale matter before the limb regenerated and reformed almost immediately. Code landed hard, eyes narrowing as he put distance between them once more. "What did you do?" Code growled, his voice edged with disbelief as he leapt back. He didn't wait for an answer. All four arms moved at once as he attacked again, his strikes coming fast and wide, designed to drown them in pressure and force a mistake. There was none. The moment Code committed, he adjusted. Not separately, not in response to one another, but as a single correction. The attack passed through empty space as if it had been misjudged from the start. Kawaki was already in position, receivers forming mid-swing as Boruto altered trajectory without conscious thought, timing and angle aligning perfectly. There were no signals exchanged, no shouted warnings, no visible coordination. Each movement completed the other without delay. It was as if they were two wills in one. Boruto felt Kawaki's instinct to dominate the exchange, to crush Code outright and end the fight by sheer pressure. At the same time, Kawaki felt Boruto's hesitation, the instinct to observe, to wait for the moment that mattered instead of forcing one. The conflict did not escalate, but it resolved. Not through compromise, but through understanding. Each recognized what the other lacked, and the gap closed without discussion. The resistance vanished, and with it the sense of separation. He was still Boruto. He was still Kawaki. But the space between those truths no longer mattered. Boruto's left eye and Kawaki's right eye surged with power simultaneously as they surged forward. The fight lost its rhythm, becoming something closer to execution. Each action completed a thought that had already passed through both of them. When Kawaki committed, Boruto understood why. When Boruto hesitated, Kawaki knew exactly how long that hesitation would last and what purpose it served. It was unsettling. Not because it felt foreign, but because it felt right. Too right. He became aware of the cost even as they pressed forward. Memories surfaced unbidden, fragments of thought bleeding through the shared state. Kawaki felt echoes of Boruto's past. Training sessions taken lightly, confidence mistaken for completion. The slow realization that talent meant nothing without endurance. Boruto, in turn, felt the weight Kawaki carried, the constant readiness to destroy himself if it meant protecting something he had chosen to call his own. There was no judgment between them, only acknowledgement. So this is what it means, he thought, not aloud, not fully formed, but present in both of them at once. Not power, responsibility. The soul of a shinobi wasn't in technique or bloodline. It was in enduring alignment without losing yourself. in carrying another's intent alongside your own and still choosing to move forward. To have the guts to never give up. I think I understand what you finally went through, Dad. Code struck again, desperate now, his movements sharp but unfocused. They dismantled the attack without effort. Kawaki's receivers forced Code's movement. Boruto's blade punished the outcome. Each response arrived exactly when it was needed, not sooner, not later. The margin for error collapsed to nothing. Code jumped back, his stance cautious and eyes tinted with something close to annoyance. Still defying the inevitable, Boruto, Kawaki? Code sneered. Code's chakra flared as he got ready in a battle stance, intending on charging forward once more. With the power I've gained from consuming Amato's creations, I've become something more than an Ōtsutsuki or a Shinju. I've become the closest thing to Shirbai Ōtsutsuki. And yet you fools still think you can defeat me. Boruto's body stepped forward, sword humming, Kawaki's chakra rising in perfect synchronization with his own. We do not think, they said calmly, the answer shaped by both of them. We simply know. 4 years before the battle with Code, the roar of a train pierced the air as it ran across the rails, winding through buildings and forests. On the roof of the train, 3 figures stood beneath the sunrise, watching as the sun slowly began to rise above the Hokage monument. Boruto Uzumaki leaned back a little, with his hands behind his hair, the wind whipping through his hair. The year where we graduate and become genin. It's been a pretty long ride since the beginning of the academy. Besides him, Sarada Uchiha sat cross-legged, her onyx eyes fixed on the horizon as the sunlight illuminated her pitch-black hair. She didn't smile, only frowned at something. And across from her, Mitsuki with a coy smile spoke. It won't be easy. Graduation is just the start of us becoming full-fledged ninja. I don't care if it's easy or not. Sarada spoke, a determined edge in her voice as her fists clenched in her lap. This is my chance. A chance to prove I'm not just Sasuke Uchiha's daughter. Boruto glanced at her, curious. From what he had heard, Sasuke was a pretty cool and badass ninja, with tons of amazing jutsu. Why wouldn't she want to strive to be like him? People still glare at me, even after all these years. She spat, becoming more irritated. Like I'm going to snap one day. Like the curse of hatred will consume me because of my Uchiha blood. Just like with Itachi, Obito, and Madara. She took a deep breath. And I don't want to prove them right at all. I want to show I'm a proud ninja of Konoha. Please, Boruto snorted. You're too stuck up and annoying to fall for that whole curse of hatred bull. To which Mitsuki laughed, and Sarada rolled her eyes, with a faint smile on her lips. And what about you, dumb Boruto? Sarada retorted. Why do you want to be a ninja? That was a good question. It wasn't a question he had really focused on, as he either focused on cruising through the academy easily, or enjoying a thunder burger with his friends after school. He didn't really care about the type of shinobi he was, just that he would look really cool, and maybe surpass his dad and get out of his shadow one day. With that in mind, as for me, I just want to get out of my dad's shadow and become a cool shinobi. When people look at me, all they see is that I'm Lord Seventh's kid, and not just plain old Boruto. Boruto spoke, glancing at his 2 friends. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Mitsuki said simply. After all, you are my son. And a son doesn't need the help of others to shine on its own and be unique. A tad bit weird coming from Mitsuki, but he had always been like this ever since they had first met. The pale, blue-haired boy's mannerisms were a bit odd, and somewhat mocking at times, but Boruto had found it endearing as the 2 of them grew closer over time. And what about you, Mitsuki? Boruto asked, directing the conversation to him. Why do you want to be a shinobi? Mitsuki hesitated, before saying, for all my life, I've been searching for what I was meant to do with the life that was given to me. Besides protecting you and Sarada, I'm not sure what else I want to do. The boy paused, then continued, I'm hoping that becoming a shinobi will give me the answers I seek to this mysterious life of mine. With that, all of them remained silent as the train whistle shrieked. In the distance, the hidden leaf rose into view, alive with morning bustle. Whatever's waiting for us outside, I'm ready for it. Sarada spoke as she stood, preparing to jump into the nearest house and make her way home. Then let's make this the start of something big. Boruto smirked, a cocky edge growing in his tone. The three jumped from the roof of the train, effortlessly landing on the balcony of a house within the village as they jumped from house to house. Within the shadows of an abandoned laboratory, multiple broken test tubes lined up at the ends of a hall, with broken glass and green fluids littering the solid floor. At the end of the hall, there was a large test tube containing some large creature. In front of it was a cloaked figure, her body trembling with waves of anticipation and hatred. The figure had waited so long for this very moment. From gathering enormous amounts of chakra to finding the right genes to implant into her project. And now it was ready. It's time to crush the leaf and raze it to the ground. The cloaked figure spoke softly, her emotion buried under layers of bitterness and hatred. The world may have forgotten about how Naruto Uzumaki had thrown away Root like trash, how he made her father and mother suffer before indirectly killing them, but she would never forget. She would never forget how he harbored criminals like Orochimaru and Sasuke Uchiha, the latter having murdered Danzo Shimura, who only wanted to protect the leaf. But by the time she was through with the leaf, the world would never forget ever again. And it all starts with this, the figure whispered, laying her hand on the test tube, as the creature opened its eye to reveal a glowing yellow eye, full of bestial hatred. An artificial summon, containing the ultimate power. Kawaki. Deep within a remote stronghold, a boy lay slumped against the wall, his breath labored and blood dripping from his lip. His arms trembled, and his body bore the marks of brutal training. Fractures, bruises, and swollenness on his body. The boy slowly raised his hand, using whatever strength he had left to look at the black, diamond-like mark on his palm. The karma, it is a gift I bestowed upon you. A voice from long ago spoke. This mark is the only way to fill your hollow heart and body, so that you may have a purpose. Without it, you are nothing. He had thought maybe things would get better, now that he was valuable because of the karma. It was what Jigen had told him after all. Now he had value to others, compared to when he was stuck at his village. But this karma mark had only been a curse from him. He had been ripped away from one abusive home only to be subjected to a place far worse than hell. They said this mark would make me special, more valuable. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. But all it did was break me, make the hole in my heart grow bigger. As he spoke, the karma mark pulsated, spreading across his body and responding to his pain, almost as if it was alive. His gray eyes began to glow with rage as he spoke. But I'll get stronger from this training. Strong enough to kill all those bastards who subjected me to this hell. Boruto sat at the breakfast table, lazily poking at his rice with a bored expression. His younger sister, Himawari, ate quickly, already half-packed for the school day. It had been months since he had entered the ninja academy for his final year, and so far it was a pathetically boring snooze. He wanted to learn the awe-inspiring jutsus his father and Sasuke used, but the teachers had insisted on a curriculum of basics. In Boruto's opinion, this was a pointless waste of his prodigious talent. After all, he was already one of the strongest, if not the strongest, in his class. He had learned 3 chakra natures, could do the shadow clone jutsu, and his intellect was off the charts. Yet here he was, forced to go through the motions like everyone else, as if the basics were anything but a formality for someone of his skill. A noise broke through his thoughts as Boruto's mother, Hinata, moved through the kitchen with practiced grace. "Eat up, Boruto," she said gently. "You don't want to be late for school." "I won't be," Boruto grunted, as he grabbed a piece of tamagoyaki. "We're probably not even doing anything special in school today." He was frustrated by the new rules implemented by Uncle Kakashi and his father long ago after the 4th Great Ninja What? Kids couldn't graduate early and were required to take core subjects unrelated to being a ninja. The ninja parts covered basics like tree and water walking and scroll storage, all of which he had already mastered. Why couldn't he graduate early? The sooner he did, the sooner he could unlock a world of amazing jutsu. Just then, The door opened and in stepped Naruto Uzumaki, his father. His Hokage cloak was slung over his shoulders like a cape, and his hair was a little frazzled from rooftop travel. "Morning," Naruto said, brushing dust off of his orange robe. "Looks like I made it in time for Hinata's delicious breakfast." "Oh, thank you, Naruto." Hinata spoke, a smile growing on her face. "You're lucky." Himawari was just about to head out. "Papa!" Himawari ran to give him a big hug. "You're here. The real you. Good. If he wasn't, I would have kicked his ass." Boruto smirked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. In truth, Boruto held no real grudge against his father for the missed dinners. It had been explained to him and Himawari early on that the demands of the Hokage's office often meant he could only send a clone. But at the end of the day, Naruto was still there, still trying to make time for his family, and Boruto was grateful for that, especially considering what he knew of Sarada's situation with her dad. "Figured I'd drop by before things get crazy again." Naruto chuckled, ignoring the sarcasm as he sat down across Boruto. "Word is, you've got graduation coming up soon." Boruto nodded through a mouthful of rice. "Yep, it's probably going to be the easiest graduation ever, with how strong I am." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "That confident, huh?" "Well, yeah." Boruto snorted, settling down his chopsticks. "Come on, Dad. I've been doing clones since I was 8, and I know more chakra natures and jutsu than half my class already." Naruto leaned back. "Being a shinobi isn't just about jutsu. It's about grit, discipline, knowing when to fight and when not to." Boruto rolled his eyes. Yeah, the classic dad speech. The classic dad speech, where his dad would lecture about the real world and how people could get hurt in real life. As if that had ever happened to Boruto. After all, the young shinobi was basically one of the strongest in his class. And after graduation, that was when he'd learn more jutsu and become one of the strongest ninja ever. "I'm serious," Naruto said. "The world isn't always fair. Missions go wrong. People get hurt. If you're not ready for that." "I'll be fine," Boruto interrupted. "Besides, I've got Mitsuki and Sarada, and you're the Hokage. What could go wrong?" Naruto stared at him for a moment, then gave a small smile, gentle but slightly weary. "Just remember, being a shinobi isn't a game. I learned that the hard way, and I really hope you don't have to go through the same things I did." Boruto grabbed his bag and stood up. "I'll be back before dinner, unless I decide to stop and save the village on the way." Naruto chuckled. "Well, try not to destroy it in the process." As Boruto headed out the door, Naruto called after him. "Quieter now. Boruto, don't just aim to graduate. Aim to understand what being a shinobi really means." Boruto paused and rolled his eyes. "Sure, whatever that means." He waved, then disappeared around the corner. Naruto sat back with a sigh. "He reminds me of me. Way too much." Hinata set a cup of tea in front of him. "And just like you," she said softly. "He'll learn eventually." Meanwhile, in the Uchiha residence, Sarada stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her glasses with a frown. It was almost time to go to the academy. Sarada could already predict what they were going to learn for the rest of the year. The same basic taijutsu, water and tree walking, scroll storage, and the non-ninja core activities. She found most of these subjects useless for combat, but she forced herself to pay attention. They served to build her chakra reserves little by little, and the non-ninja activities, like citizen protection, had their place in real missions. Sakura poked her head into the room, beaming. "Morning, Sarada. Are you almost ready? School is about to start." Sarada turned around and looked at Sakura. "Hey, Mom. You look so grown up in your uniform. I'm so proud of you, Sarada." Sarada nodded stiffly. "Thanks, Mom. I just wish your father could be here to see this," Sakura added wistfully. Her father, the one who was never here, the one who got her mother pregnant and then barely visited from time to time, the man who had betrayed the village, and because of that and his bloodline, Sarada was constantly judged and forced to strive for perfection. It was one of the reasons she envied Boruto a little. He had a father who he saw at least 3 times a week, a father who was regarded as a hero of the village, and the strongest shinobi of his time. Most of all, neither his father nor his bloodline had a history of being traitors. As a matter of fact, they were praised for being heroes. Boruto could just exist in the village, and everyone would treat him like some sort of king, which she knew he hated. After all, he'd wanted to make his own mark on the world independent of his father. Meanwhile, Sarada had to fight to prove herself every single day. Fight to prove that she wasn't like any of the other Uchiha before her. Memories began to rise unbidden, sharp as a kunai's edge. It's dangerous, letting Uchiha kids train like the others, one man whispered. What if she turns out like Madara? Or like her father before Naruto stopped him? Bet she hits the target in one shot. A boy snickered behind her. Of course she will, another replied louder. She's an Uchiha. They're all geniuses, right? Just don't stand too close. She might snap and try to kill us like her dad did. Maybe she'll wake up one morning with that crazy eye thing, one of the boys whispered. Sharingan makes you go nuts. My dad said so. Said all the Uchihas are cursed. And it was all because of Sasuke Uchiha. So she was a little glad she didn't have to see him for graduation. After all, if he wasn't there for her earlier, then why should he show up now? But it still hurt when she saw other people, especially Boruto, hanging out with their own dads though. It still hurt that her dad was never around to see her accomplishments. Sarada's grip on her headband tightened. Yeah, I know. She turned away, but Sakura grabbed her hand before she could walk out the door. I know it hasn't been easy, with your father not being here and all. Sakura spoke, kneeling down to meet Sarada's height. But he has his own reasons, and everything he does is out of love for us. For you. Sarada's anger rose as she heard those words. For her? What a joke. If her dad really cared about her, then why did he leave? Why barely visit Sarada and her mother? I'll be back late, she muttered, jerking away from her mother and walking out the door before Sakura could respond. Sakura sighed and glanced at the photo of a baby Sarada along with herself and Sasuke. Come back soon, Sasuke. Maybe you'll be able to explain everything to her. Boruto, Sarada, and Mitsuki met near the front gates, walking side by side through the main quad. Familiar faces greeted them in the crowd of students as they passed. Inajin, Cho-Cho, and Shikadai, who yawned loudly. Morning, Boruto said casually, looking towards his closest friend ever since they were in diapers. Barely, Shikadai grumbled, his face growing more irritated. Some of us like sleep, Cho-Cho smiled. Some of us also like snacks. But priorities. It was always nice to see their unique personalities on display, especially since Shikadai's laziness helped out a lot when he needed a buddy to help sneak out of school and play video games. The only downside of that was that Shikadai tended to have a short fuse whenever he lost the games that they were playing, which was funny at times, but worked against them at other times when Shikadai's rage was one of many reasons why they were eventually caught and given detention. More familiar faces dotted the crowd as well. Sumire Keikei, the class representative who was always quiet and polite. Metal Lee, a kid with green spandex stretching beside a tree, getting ready for today's lesson. The dude was a hard worker, but was really nervous when performing in front of other people for some reason. Iwabi was muttering to himself about crushing today's lesson. Before, he had been a punk who was skilled in all manners of earth jutsu, but didn't believe in the theories and the non-ninja classes. Boruto shared the same sentiment with him, which is one of the many reasons why he helped him to study. Then there was Asahi Hatake, son of legends, talking excitedly with Kaidi Sarutobi and Riku Inuzuka. If there was one person who he would consider his rival outside of Sarada, it would be Asahi. He was about as strong as him, if not stronger, with unparalleled mastery of lightning and earth jutsu in their class. Boruto had many spars against him, and most of their fights had ended up with Asahi on top. The crowd of students walked inside when the academy teachers showed up and instructed them to go to their classes. Inside, Shino Aburame stood motionless at the front of the classroom, insects subtly crawling beneath his hooded cloak. He spoke in a low, calm tone. You are all nearing graduation, and as such, we've arranged a lesson with a special guest. The door opened. Konohamaru Sarutobi stepped in with his signature confident smile. "Big bro Konohamaru," Boruto called out, waving to the man who was a close family friend. The man's presence was very enjoyable, and he taught Boruto a few of his techniques, the most funny one being the sexy jutsu technique. Unfortunately, his mother hadn't been too happy with Konohamaru and Boruto when she'd found out. It was a story for another time though. "Hey Boruto," the man smiled, before walking over to him and whispering, "Remember, it's Konohamaru-sensei when we're in public." "Sure thing, big bro Konohamaru," Boruto grinned, to which Konohamaru let out an exasperated sigh and went back to the front of the class to explain what they were doing today. "Today, we're going to be continuing where you guys left on summoning techniques. You'll each be practicing summoning tools through scrolls." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. "Wait, summoning animals too?" someone asked. Konohamaru raised a hand. "Animal contracts require a bond and a lot more chakra. For now, let's focus on weapons." Scrolls were handed out, and the students practiced channeling chakra into them. Some summoned kunai, others shuriken. A few managed smoke bombs, much to the class's amusement. For Boruto, it was another boring class where he didn't learn anything new. For Sarada, she took the chance to ask Shino-sensei and Konohamaru-sensei about different ways to apply scroll storage weapons in terms of combat. For Mitsuki, it was another day to bother students with his odd mannerisms and blunt words that could be taken as insults, which he enjoyed doing. Of course, all nice and good things must come to an end when people end up arguing. Rei was having trouble performing the storage summon, to which Erasure had noticed and made a pointed joke at her. "You know, maybe if you spent less time focusing on your nails and makeup, and focused more on training to be a ninja, you'd actually be able to summon something." Of course, Rei didn't take this joke lightly, and became incensed. "Excuse me. My makeup and nail polish are all complimentary things that help with becoming a ninja too. Not that an idiot who obsesses over training every day would understand that." "That's totally true," Chocho agreed. "Appearances matter a lot. Hold on guys. Let's settle down a little." Sumire spoke softly, but was interrupted by other loud students. "Not if it prevents you from pushing your body to the limit," Metal Lee cried out. Eventually, the argument developed into a full-blown boys versus girls shouting match. Shino sighed deeply in exasperation. "They were doing so well." Konohamaru chuckled. "Maybe it's time for a little team-building exercise. I mean, after all, sitting around here just summoning scrolls isn't going to be that great on their nerves. I was like that once when I was younger." "You do have a point," Shino mused. "Besides, it would be a good way to test their combat aptitude and teamwork abilities for the final exams." He clapped his hands. "Everyone, listen up." All of the students stopped their shouting match to look over at their sensei. "Capture the flag for everyone here. Boys versus girls. Battle starts after lunch." Cheers and groans echoed around the room. After lunch, everyone was washing up and getting ready for the capture the flag battle. But there was one figure who had other intentions for this battle. "There aren't any negative emotions out there that I can manipulate," the figure muttered. "I guess Konoha learned from my strikes early on from 3 years ago." This wasn't the first time that the figure had attacked Konoha in order to drain and absorb chakra from citizens to fuel her project. The attacks, however, had put Konoha on high alert, and she was forced to stop her project temporarily in order to lure them into a false sense of security. "But now we can begin the plan in earnest," the figure whispered, before making their way to the academy. The Orange Spark. "Thank you so much for leaving a review. I'm a big fan of your work. A bet of a lifetime. I hope to meet yours and everyone else's expectations for how this story will play out differently from canon Boruto." Salt the Conqueror. "Thank you very much. I'm hoping to show the later chapters and arcs a little more love and detail, since this arc is really just meant to introduce us to the characters and set up one of the main antagonists through the entirety of books 1 through 3. This story is going to have major changes to canon Boruto, but most of the important arcs will have similar outcomes and endings to canon Boruto while expanding upon said arcs. The morning sun hung low, a pale orb in the sky, casting slanted beams of light through the academy's windows. The golden rays illuminated motes of dust that danced in the air like tiny, suspended stars, oblivious to the simmering tension below. The training yard, a sprawling expanse of packed dirt and battered target dummies, was divided in half by a thin, rope line. A simple boundary that felt as absolute as a canyon. A tense silence simmered among the boys clustered on the east side of the yard, their focus locked on the mock battlefield. The air was thick with competitive energy, the weight of a friendly but fiercely contested rivalry. Boruto and Shikadai stood at the center of the group, a natural duo of recklessness and strategy. Boruto, with his spiky blonde hair and confident smirk, was a whirlwind of unpredictable energy. Shikadai, with his hands tucked deep in his pockets and his eyes half-lidded, was the calm, calculating eye of the storm. Around them, Iwabi, Asahi, Mitsuki, and the rest of the boys listened intently, their individual energies coalescing into a single-minded force. "All right," Boruto began, scratching his cheek with the butt of a kunai. His grin was wide, brimming with a mischievous energy that was his signature. "Iwabi, Asahi, you two use Earth style to set up a defensive wall around our flag. Reinforce it and stay back to guard it. Mitsuki and I will rig traps. The rest of you follow Shikadai's lead to push forward." Iwabi cracked his knuckles, a wide, confident grin on his face. He felt the familiar thrill of battle, a low hum of power in his veins. The promise of a physical confrontation was a lure he couldn't resist. "Easy work. We'll have this flag locked down so tight the girls won't even get close." "Don't underestimate them," Shikadai muttered, his eyes, half-lidded with a lazy focus, sweeping over the girls' side of the field. His mind was already at work, a complex web of probabilities and counterprobabilities unfolding. He knew the girls' team and he knew their leader. Sarada's probably planning her own little invasion. She wants to win this more than any of us, and that makes her predictable. Shikadai knew Sarada was more headstrong and resilient than most in the class. It made her a fierce rival who would never give up, but it also gave her tunnel vision. She saw every battle as a straight line to victory, and that single-minded focus was a flaw, which Shikadai and Boruto would happily take advantage of if the opportunity presented itself. If you want more stories like this, like the video and subscribe to the channel.